Barely a day after her profession, Saint Therese was violently tempted by the devil to think that she didn't have a vocation to be a Carmelite, and she was inclined to abandon the convent. Many of you might not understand what that exactly means, because you aren't living a religious life. But I'll prove to you that you can and already must have had similar temptations, and learning how Saint Therese fought against them will change everything for you. I'm sure that you've never imagined or even knew that Saint Therese, the greatest of modern day saints, was severely tempted to abandon her God-given vocation just one day before her profession as a cloistered Carmelite nun. So, join me with my trusty magnifying glass as we penetrate deep within the walls of the cloister to discover how Saint Therese faced her worst trial until that moment. And I'm going to say, don't let the devil convince you to skip this video thinking that it's only meant for religious. But let me assure you, there's much to learn no matter what your state of life is. So stay with me to the end, because Saint Therese wants to shower you with some beautiful roses from heaven. But before we start, I would like to thank all our members of our channel and welcome any new ones that have joined since the last video. And to also tell you to get ready, because soon we'll be doing another poll to see the next saint that we will be talking about. So now back to Saint Therese. Pope St. John Paul II declares Saint Therese one of the 3 women in history as a doctor of the church. For more than a century now, millions of souls from France and around the world have been touched by Saint Therese's desire not to be mighty and great, but to be a humble little flower in the spiritual garden of God. In her autobiography, Story of a Soul, besides becoming a bestseller, has captivated innumerable hearts from around the world. If you haven't read it yet, I strongly recommend that you do. It will do much good for you. In fact, barely 20 years after her death, copies of her now famous autobiography were circulating amongst the French troops during the thick of the First World War. And devotion to Saint Therese spread like wildfire. And there are reports of at least thousands or more apparitions of Saint Therese on the battlefield to encourage the French troops. And thus, one can rightly conclude that Saint Therese of Lisieux, her interventions changed the course of the entire First World War. Isn't that just amazing? Who would have thought that a cloistered nun could do so much? And yet, as in the case with all saints, Saint Therese had to face plenty of spiritual battles and trials during her short life. Little Therese tried from her 9th year onwards to follow her sisters into the Discalced Carmelites at Lisieux. The Mother Superior of the convent had broken Therese's heart by informing her that she could only be accepted when she turned either 21 or 22. Even at 14 years old, the bishop considered her too young, and the undaunted Therese wouldn't take no for an answer. She went so far as to personally implore Pope Leo XIII on a visit to Rome. And when Therese was barely 15, she even came up with the ingenious idea of arranging her hair in a particular way to make her look older and more mature in an attempt to convince the Mother Superior to admit her into the Carmel. But finally, on April 9th, 1888, Therese was admitted into the Carmel. After having passed through so many struggles and battles to enter the holy walls of the Carmel of Lisieux, how was the devil able to trick her into almost abandoning the convent and her religious vocation? Well, I will let Saint Therese herself tell you. Speaking about her profession, she says, "The day before, there rose in my soul a storm like one that I had never seen before. That night, after visiting the Stations of the Cross, my vocation appeared to me as a dream, as a figment of my imagination. I found my life at Carmel to be quite beautiful, but the devil inspired in me the assurance that it wasn't made for me, that I would be deceiving my superiors by going forward along a path to which I wasn't called. My darkness was so great that I could see or understand only one thing. I didn't have the calling. It seemed to me that if I told all my fears to my novice mistress, she was going to prevent me from pronouncing my holy vows. Silence. Yes, silence. That's the tactic that the devil typically uses against his victims. Like a bloodthirsty wolf, the devil grabs the sheep that it has closed in on by the throat to throttle any noise so that it does not attract the attention of the shepherd, because once the shepherd knows of the wolf's presence, the wolf will lose his prey, get chased away, or even killed. That's exactly what the devil did to Saint Therese, because he perceived that she was a chosen soul with a great vocation, and he had to do everything to get her out before she could become the bride of Jesus forever. And how did Saint Therese get out of this terrible trial? She continues, I wanted to do God's will and return to the world rather than remain in the Carmel doing my own will. So I asked my novice mistress to come out, and full of embarrassment and shame, I told her the state of my soul. Fortunately, she saw more clearly than I did, and she reassured me completely. Besides, the act of humility that I had done had just put to flight the devil, who was perhaps thinking that I wasn't going to be daring enough to admit my temptation. Immediately after I finished speaking, my doubts left me. Nonetheless, in order to make my act of humility complete, I wanted to go on and confide my strange temptation to our superior, who was content to laugh at me. And so here we have it, the 3 golden keys which helped Saint Therese come out victorious from this most terrible trial: integrity, honesty, and humility. She wanted to do God's will no matter what the cost. In spite of her personal humiliation, she opened up her soul and confided in her superiors, who reassured her and confirmed her in her vocation. Only later on, thinking about the absurdity of this whole affair, she concluded that this nefarious temptation had come from the devil. And in a moment, we will do some forensic analysis to find out why God permitted this temptation. Surely, it wasn't by Saint Therese's fault, right? Anyway, more on that in a moment. So, how did Jesus reward his little flower for her fidelity? She finally pronounced her vows on the morning of the 8th of September, flooded with a river of peace. Saint Therese says, my union with Jesus was made not amidst thunder and lightning, as with extraordinary graces, but in the midst of a gentle whisper. What graces I asked for that day! I felt myself truly the queen, so I took advantage of my title of nobility to free captives, to obtain favors of the king towards his ungrateful subjects. In short, I wanted to free all souls from purgatory and convert sinners. I prayed for the whole family. I offered myself to Jesus so that he might accomplish his will perfectly in me without creatures ever placing any obstacle in its path. What a beautiful feast day was the birthday of Mary to become Jesus' bride. It was the little Blessed Virgin of one day who presented her little flower to the little Jesus. So, what can we take home from this for our spiritual life? First and foremost, we should always strive to know God's holy will in our lives. And for this, we need the wise counsels of a holy confessor, a religious superior, or that of an elder in the family, in addition to personal prayer and discernment. And once you know God's will, you should pray to Our Lady to obtain for you the graces to promptly fulfill His will. Since we live in this valley of tears, trials and temptations of all sorts and kinds will regularly come our way. Following St. Therese's holy example, let us overcome our shame and seek help. We cannot do this on our own. We need guidance, and if necessary, even forgiveness and confession. All the saints, all of them, are unanimous in telling us that just the fact that we humbly open up to a confessor or a spiritual director, half the battle is won. The devil takes flight when we do this. But why does he hate this so much? Magnifying glass, where are you? Oh, here it is. The devil hates it when someone humbly asks for another's help, because he wants to be independent from God, and he can't bear it when he sees someone that humbly asks another for help. So we have to ask for help. But remember, although God, He can help us directly, normally He doesn't do so. He does it through other human beings. This prevents us from entering into that illusion that makes us think that we are superhuman or self-made saints. This dependence on others reminds us that we are not independent of God. This is so crucial that without this, even the most virtuous of souls can slowly fall into sins and more sins and eventually be condemned forever. And so, like St. Therese, let us turn to our Blessed Mother with childlike confidence and complete dependence on her. Because when we surrender ourselves and our independence to our Blessed Mother, she in turn surrenders us to her Divine Son. Do you want to escape from the devil, who is always on the prowl like a ferocious wolf, seeking to separate you from Jesus the Good Shepherd and drag you to hell? If so, consecrate yourself without delay to our Lord Jesus Christ through the hands of His Blessed Mother, according to the method of St. Louis de Montfort. Click on the link below to find out more and to register for our free online consecration course. Now, coming back to St. Therese, she had offered herself to her beloved Jesus on the day of her vows, and she says, "I was thinking that soon beautiful heaven would open to my delighted eyes, and I would be able to unite myself with my bridegroom in the midst of everlasting joy and gladness." However, very soon Jesus was going to take away someone very special to Therese in the convent, and soon the convent will be made desolate with the scourge of disease. How would the young Therese cope with these challenges and the other ups and downs of life in the Carmel? Join me in the next episode as we explore these little known but important events in the history of the Carmel of Lisieux. So, until next time, God bless and Salve Maria.